Within diner, 4, 3, set.
Get in position and wait for my go.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Erkley and welcome to another edition of the PE Crime Blotter, a weekly look at crime here in the Inland Empire. We begin with crime headlines. 54-year-old Lonnie Lee Remmers, leader of Heart Worship Community Church in Corona, posted $35,000 bail last week and was released from county jail in Riverside. Remmers is charged with felony assault with a deadly weapon and inflicting injury on a child. Two other men, 20-year-old Nicholas James Craig and 28-year-old Daryl Dwayne Jeter Jr., remained in custody. They are charged with kidnapping, assault, and other felonies. Investigators say Craig and Jeter drove a teen to the desert March 18th, forced him to dig a grave, threw dirt on him, and beat him with a belt. Police say Remmers later used a pair of pliers to inflict pain on the boy. On Friday, a judge entered a not guilty plea for Moreno Valley School Board member Mike Rios, who faces charges of pimping, pandering, and rape on top of a previous allegation of attempted murder. Rios remains in jail. Rios told the Press Enterprise all charges have been fabricated by unidentified elected officials who Rios says want to prevent him from running for city council. Last week's shooting death of a former San Bernardino TV and computer repairman sparked burglary, robbery, and murder charges this week against the victim's widow and two men. 64-year-old Joseph Cohn was gunned down April 2nd at his home and robbed of cash, firearms, and his pickup truck. Deputy District Attorney William Lee is prosecuting 47-year-old Lori Jean Cohn, 39-year-old Shauna Bayless, and 29-year-old Gary Gallion. Authorities are searching for two men who fled a suburban East Hemet home last Wednesday during an inferno caused by a marijuana lab explosion. Riverside County Sheriff's investigators determined burning marijuana chemicals set the blaze that destroyed a home at the corner of Acacia Avenue and Lake Street in the unincorporated neighborhood of Little Lake. A Menifee father has been charged with assaulting his 2-year-old son, who was hospitalized with serious injuries earlier this year. Riverside County Sheriff's investigators arrested 26-year-old Cleophas Fitz II last week on suspicion of attempted murder, torture, and other charges. Prosecutors filed a single charge of felony assault on a child. Sheriff's officials say Fitz took his son to a hospital in February, claiming the child had accidentally fallen down the stairs at their Menifee home. The boy suffered serious head, neck, and brain injuries and had been in a hospital ICU. Court records showed the Fitz pleaded guilty a year ago to abusing another small child in Washington State and was sentenced to probation. Well, that does it for this week's crime headlines. Up next on the docket. It is now time for our On the Docket segment. We're taking a look at the big court cases in Riverside and San Bernardino County. Joining me, as always, the Press Enterprise's Rich Diatley. Rich, the first case, one we pretty much talk about on a weekly basis, that of Earl Ellis Green.
Right. Jury selection has begun in the trial. Green is charged in the death penalty case with the slaying of Riverside police officer Ryan Bonaminio in November of 2010. An initial jury pool of about 300, and attorneys for both sides will go over questionnaires, listen to hardship, and probably break it down to about 12 jurors, 6 alternates. Testimony and evidence begins at the end of the month.
Next case involves Brett Coronado and Mark Mackey, two men reading a Bible in front of the DMV in Hemet.
Right. What they're charged with is misdemeanor demonstration on state property. Their arraignment, which is what's up this week, has been delayed several times as they appeal even the charges being filed against them. California Highway Patrol officers made the arrest. The state says this is a matter of demonstrating on state property without a license. It has nothing to do with the content of what they were doing, which is reading the Bible. Their pastor, their former pastor that is, and authorities say they were warned more than once about this.
Our next case involves Tyrone Hartz, a man accused of murdering his ex-girlfriend in front of her 6 children.
It was a scene in Moreno Valley in February of 2010. Police say Hartz came back to the home that he had occupied with his former girlfriend, Brandy Morales Real, shot her in front of her children and then set her ablaze, and some of the children had to extinguish that fire. He faces the death penalty as well, pleaded not guilty. His preliminary hearing is this week.
All right, Rich, thanks for joining us. As always, be sure to keep us updated on these cases. That does it for this week's On the Docket. Up next, In Depth. It's now time for our In-Depth segment. We're discussing Lonnie Lee Remmers, the pastor from Corona that was arrested last week. I'm now joined by John Asbury from the Press Enterprise. He has the details on the case.
Right. Last week, Lonnie Lee Remmers and two other men were arrested, accused of torture and kidnapping. Corona police said a 13-year-old boy's mother had gone to the Heart of Worship Church in Corona, where the boy attended, and had asked Remmers and the other men to, in essence, discipline them or teach him a lesson after he was involved in some sexual misconduct. As a result of that, Remmers and the men took the boy to the desert, made him dig a grave, and threw dirt on him as they threatened to kill him with a shovel. After that, they took him from the area near Barstow back to a home in Corona, where he was tied up, tortured with a pair of pliers, and pepper sprayed.
Now, John, there's been talk about some type of affiliation between these men and the Corona Police Department.
Right. Corona police have said that Remmers was a volunteer with the Corona Police Volunteers Association, as well as had applied to become a pastor. He was turned down from becoming a pastor after authorities discovered he had a prior conviction in the 90s for federal theft charges. And as a result, Corona police have said that there were a total of 5 people from the Corona Volunteers Association who have since left the police department.
John, he was released on bail with $35,000 last week. He did appear in court along with the other 2 men. What's next? Right.
Hearing is expected to take quite a long time. He should be in court pretty soon, where he will face these charges and could ultimately go to trial.
All right, John, thanks for joining us. That does it for this week's In-Depth segment. Coming up next, Off the Beat. Last but not least, it is time for our Off the Beat segment. We're discussing a man arrested last week in the San Bernardino Mountains, caught with 100 gallons of stolen gasoline, but didn't exactly get away too easily. I am joined now by the Press Enterprise's Steve Barry. Steve, tell us exactly what happened.
Well, when employees of the Snow Valley Ski Resort came to work Wednesday morning, they found Gino Daniel Cordero, 41, of San Bernardino, sitting in a F-150 pickup truck that was buried up to its axle in the mud and snow. It appears that over the course of the night he had been pumping gasoline out of tanks of vehicles at the resort there, filling up a 200-gallon tank in the bed of the truck. They think about 100 gallons of that probably was taken from the resort. He also appears to have tried to get out of the mud by stealing chains and vehicles in the sheds there. To tow himself out. None of that worked, and he was indeed stuck in the snow.
Now, he didn't exactly get away too well that time, but there were other times that police believe he may have stolen other items.
Yeah, they found a video surveillance camera in the truck that they don't think belonged to the ski resort. They're thinking it was stolen from somewhere else. So they're assuming that he probably has a history of thefts in the mountain area there.
And if anyone has any type of information, where can they call?
Detective Carrie Klaus at the Twin Peaks Sheriff's Station there. She can be reached at 909-336-0600. Anyone wishing to remain anonymous in their tipping should call the We Tip hotline at 1-800-78-CRIME.
All right, Steve, thanks for joining us. That does it for our Off the Beat segment and also wraps up this week's PE Crime Blotter. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.